Welcome to Let's Be Frank, and today we're going to talk about change. Actually, in Let's Be Frank version 1 from 2018, this was a big topic that we spoke about in a slightly different context. This time we were thinking that the viewpoint that you hold today and the way that you feel and think about a situation today, maybe your philosophies, maybe your morals today are not the same as what they were a year ago, 2 years ago, yesterday, or what they might be tomorrow, a year from now, in the future. And it's kind of this idea that you should be challenging yourself and the things that you believe and looking at different perspectives and changing your mind about certain things, because you might not be right about everything in this moment right now.
So the first question I have is, what have you changed your mind about recently?
I change my mind about things all the time. so definitely one of the big ones, and one that's come up in a few of our other podcasts and that we've spoken about, is the idea of being selfish. Um, I would say that a few years ago, I would have sacrificed everything I had and every feeling I had for other people, um, and always making sure everyone else was comfortable, even if it made me uncomfortable, and um, just always putting other people first. Which when you say it, it sounds like a really nice virtue to have, that you put other people before yourself. But now I think quite differently, and I am very focused on, as Ayn Rand phrases it, rational selfishness,
Mm.
and not to the point where I'm hurting anyone else or ignoring other people or not caring about other people's needs, but to the point where I want to make sure that I'm in a good space first, and that I put my needs and myself first. So that's probably one of the biggest changes that has happened in my life over the past few years.
Okay, and yeah, it's interesting because when you first say, I would have put everyone else first, and I would have done everything to please anybody. You have to kind of qualify that. You wouldn't put some random stranger 10,000 miles away
Yeah.
that you don't have. But but I, but I think in terms of the context of really understanding selfishness, and that it is not the bad thing that we were taught, um, is a really important realization.
Yeah.
It's kind of liberating in a way. And it doesn't mean that you are a mean person. It actually completely the opposite,
Yeah.
but um, not sacrificing yourself for others is extremely important.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of bad is done in the world in the name of don't be selfish.
Yeah. I agree with you on that.
It's Yeah, it's just a horrible thing, because it's such an easy thing to throw out there. Don't be selfish, and then you're supposed to feel bad.
I mean, this is going back a few topics, but it almost starts at a very young age, because you're told as children to not be selfish and share your toys with everyone, and um, yeah, I feel like it starts very early on that we're taught to put everyone else before ourselves and make sure everyone else is happy first.
Yes, and I think part of that is the misconception of what selfishness is. So there's nothing wrong with teaching young kids to share their toys, um, and to be sociable. So I just think it's a question of the terminology.
Yeah.
And then there are other dogmas, etc., that also kind of focuses heavily on the don't be selfish, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But the concept or the idea of the more you look after yourself, the more you are able to care for others and look after others. Um, Completely misunderstood,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was just one example. I mean, some of the other things were, as I've been editing previous episodes of Let's Be Frank, I watch myself back and I think, oh, would I have responded in that way if you posed that question to me today? Or, is that, I don't know, some of the things that come up, I just think if I had the context then that I have now, I might have answered differently or had a different reaction to something you said. Um, and I can't think of any specific examples right now, but um, some of the things are just context based that I didn't have the knowledge then that I have now, and you're always only
And
operating from the perspective of what you know right now. So
yeah, and that context that you refer to is obviously you've been on this journey of reading a lot of books, and a lot of your reading has been around philosophies and biographies and that sort of thing. Where we get different perspectives of
yeah,
different people and so on, and that is kind of the context have changed based on what you chose to read and how you informed yourself differently to what your worldview was before.
yeah. So actually, one of the things that Ayn Rand, one of the chapters in this book is the divine right of stagnation, and it's basically about what a travesty it is if people aren't changing and learning all the
Yeah,
time, and if they are stagnating. So I we've always said change is the only constant. I think last week we spoke about death and taxes being the only constant, but change is the only constant. It's the one thing we can rely on. Is everything's going to change, the world's going to change, pandemics happen. I mean, change happens. So we have to
yeah,
be adaptable to it. Otherwise, I don't know. You'll stagnate and yeah,
and we do change.
yeah,
We do change without. So um, I think often people don't challenge their views or viewpoints. But so people say, I don't like change. That's not true. Everybody likes change. If you perceive the change to be beneficial. So if is there anybody you can think of that you would say, I would double your income, and they would say, no, I don't like change. Please don't.
please
So,
leave it the same.
so yeah. Please leave it the same. I don't like change. So, so I think we kind of perceive it about change being more effort or change disrupting my routines or habits or whatever. But we constantly change
Yeah,
as people, and you can kind of go down to the level of the um, the mind, the body, the chemicals that run this whole machine, etc., etc. That is constantly changing as well. Um, so it is a very natural thing,
yeah,
and like I said in the example, as long as it's to our benefit or perceived to our benefit, then we're very quick to change and adapt. But we, I think, are very lazy to interrogate or to challenge.
yeah,
Um, and that's where that resistance to change comes in. Please don't ask me to rethink my entire worldview, because that'll take effort.
yeah,
And I hold on to certain beliefs so dearly, that I don't want them challenged, etc.
yeah.
I think that's kind of how a lot of people view this. But if you get comfortable with that, it's actually very liberating.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm quite enjoying at the moment with ChatGPT is having these like devil's advocate interrogation conversations, because obviously it's not a real human, so I'm not upsetting anyone. but I like challenging some of the things that ChatGPT says to me and asking why and just really
Mm.
interrogating it. and it's a great learning experience for me too, because then I kind of get these different perspectives that he's pulling from all these different places, which helps me to expand my thoughts and thought processes. Um,
Mm.
I have always enjoyed like a debate. I was on the debate team in school, and I like watching people debate
Yeah.
topics because you're forced to look at things from different perspectives, and very often, depending on how good the communicator is, your mind can be changed on a topic that you felt very strongly about before. Um, so yeah, my mind is changing constantly. I don't want anyone to think that what I say now is the same thing I'm going to say tomorrow.
So, but it's not necessarily about changing your mind constantly. It's about being open to to even look at things in a different way, or to at least entertain the fact that there is another option
Yeah,
that may be worth investigating. So I, I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything that kind of happened to me where I changed my mind about a fact immediately. It's
yeah,
about, okay, cool. I'm open to this. Let me understand this a little bit better. Let me think about it. Let me read a bit more about it. Let me look at different opinions about it, and and over time, kind of gets me. Oh, okay, cool. I understand where that person is coming from, and that makes sense to me.
yeah,
Um, and more than often, I find myself kind of sitting somewhere in between two viewpoints
yeah,
where I say, well, you know, these things I like about this, or I agree with about this, but there are also certain elements of this one that
yeah,
make sense to me,
yeah,
and then kind of form my own worldview somewhere in between. And it could be, I suppose, that it leans a little bit towards that side, or even further than
yeah,
whatever it was that I was thinking, or that I was exposed to.
yeah,
Um, and I think that that is extremely important, because if you just kind of enter the world, or I don't know, at what age, or what stage of your life do you think you have a reasonable worldview? If you just cling to that for the rest of your life, then I don't think you grow as a person.
no,
You don't develop.
yeah. And again, I know I'm going back to this, but it's like this travesty that if you're not, there were people that were complaining about the Industrial Revolution and that machines were going to take all these people's jobs, and actually the
Yeah,
opposite
yeah,
happened. People with it took away the laborer type of jobs, but the more intellectual jobs became much. There were much more intellectual jobs, and um, it's this whole idea that if you try to stop something from happening because you want to stop change from happening, that the world won't advance, the society won't advance. You need to allow these things to happen, and I think our generation, it's AI, not machines this time. It's the AI machines, um,
yeah.
where you have to learn to adapt and adopt and um, keep thinking and keep changing the way you think, and don't stagnate.
Correct. Yeah, no, definitely. And there's also this bias towards, um, well, in the past, either when I don't know, when I was a child, life was so good, etc., etc., or before the machines and before this or that, and that, that is definitely not the reality. Like you said, people were very fearful initially of the Industrial Revolution and what's that going to do. It made everyone's lives better.
Yeah,
Um, and, so there were a couple of these kind of big events that happened where we were initially fearful of, or a lot of people were fearful of. And then looking back now, we say, wow, that was a great change. You
Yeah.
know, same is definitely going to happen with AI. You know, I still maintain that it's not really AI. You know, it's just hardware and software. And Chat GPT can be an absolute asshole
Yeah, I've had a few
sometimes,
arguments with him.
and extremely ignorant when
Yeah.
it comes to certain topics. Um, so we're far from that point where it is, in my opinion, quite far from where it becomes a real concern, etc. So far, I'm only seeing the potential benefits
Yeah.
of using that, etc. Um, but it is exciting to think that we are kind of entering an era now where there will be massive change kind of equal, maybe bigger than the internet, you know. Um, None of us can imagine what life would be without the internet.
Nope.
So, again, coming back to the concept of change and, and adapting to change, or being open and willing to change your viewpoint or um, um, your mind about certain things is, we kind of, I wouldn't say scared, but apprehensive of what that future will look like,
Yeah.
rather than lean into that change. There's a hell of a lot that we, in terms of our current, I use the term worldview because, you know, it encompasses so much. For me, it is, your thinking about politics, uh, finances, the economy, about family structure, all of those things, and that's kind of like roughly what I see as worldview. Um, there's so much in terms of our worldview, of our current and existing worldview, that we can and should, in my opinion, constantly interrogate
Mm-hmm.
and be open to revising. And that doesn't mean you have to go from where you are now 180 degrees to the opposite. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes that 1 degree change is all you need
Yeah. Well, it's like the
to either get that.
10 books a year.
It's like the 10 books a year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's maybe it was to explain the 10 books a year.
It's the small incremental changes that can have a big effect in the long run. So for me, it was my challenge to read 10 books a year, which grew into read 20 books a year, which then went to 40 books a year. So it's, yeah, the small incremental change you can make that will have a big effect. I mean,
mm,
it'll have a big effect provided you stick with it. That's um so if you're committed to changing
yeah,
that 1% a day or whatever it is, then um yeah, it'll compound and it'll be a big change.
yeah. So, are there any specific things where you think, in terms of your current worldview, that you have to or want to challenge and interrogate and see if you potentially want to change your viewpoint, or is this something that just incidentally happens?
um I think you need to have some kind of idea in your mind, especially around a specific area or something. So I mean, we've recently been talking, and the topics we choose are topics that we're interested in because it's something that means something to us in the moment. So
Mm,
for last week's episode, taxes was something that I was really curious about, and the way government's role in society. And obviously, I've been reading a lot of the objectivism work, so that's something that's in my mind. I have never really thought about or too much about government structures and about capitalism or socialism or communism, and I hadn't really like considered those ideas really seriously. Like I know they exist and I know a little bit about all of them, but I hadn't really thought about what their impact is on societies, and which one makes the most sense or what I
Yeah.
think would be good. So I've always felt like, oh, I don't know enough about all of them to be able to have an opinion on it. So now with all of my reading, I'm trying to get myself to a point where actually I do know enough about all of them to have an opinion on it. So I'm not there yet, but that's one of the things that I am trying to feel more comfortable with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, as you get more interested or come across something that you feel like at this point I'm interested in understanding more of that, that kind of opens you up to go and either read more about it or
Listen
listen
to
to
podcasts. Yeah.
listen to podcasts or whatever to gain a better understanding or perspective of,
Yeah.
and that will help you kind of form a viewpoint,
Yeah.
which, as you say, the fact that you haven't really paid much attention or cared about politics doesn't mean that you're on your way to become some radical revolutionary, etc.,
I'm
etc.
running for president.
Yes. So, it doesn't mean that you have to change anything other
Yeah.
than have that better understanding. And when you then encounter, because politics is one of those things which, as much as we would like to be able to ignore it, we can't.
Yeah.
Um, but at least then have a better understanding of, well, if somebody says this, that, or the other, well, do I agree with them because I understand the underlying philosophies that they are referring to, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can make up your mind about whether you agree with that person or not. And that's enough. That's
Yes.
sufficient. And the same with the economy and economics and how do these things work? I mean, because we hear it every day. We hear the exchange rate has done this, and we hear that the central bank has raised or cut rates or issued treasuries or deficits,
Yeah.
etc., etc. And we don't really understand or not necessarily understand what these things mean and what the potential impact on our lives. I
Yeah.
mean, not that we can necessarily change
Yeah. But you
any of
can
it.
be prepared as best you can with the knowledge that you have.
Exactly, you can
Yeah.
be prepared and you can make better decisions
Mm-hmm.
with your personal finances, and that's enough. That doesn't mean that you have to, kind of start studying economics or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is, I think, quite important, to have better views on these broader topics that, whether we like it or not, are part of our normal daily lives.
Yeah.
And not just go, well, I don't like politics and therefore I'm ignorant about it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's part of my motivation, as well as I often find myself in a conversation between people where I don't feel like I know enough to weigh in. They might be having an argument about something, and I feel like, oh, I'll just have to sit this one out because I can't comment. And I want to be in a position where I can comment, where I can say, well, this is how I feel about this situation, or this is what I've read or heard. So that's a bit of my motivation as well, to kind of learn more and have an
yeah,
opinion on things.
or be able to ask questions,
Yeah.
more relevant questions, rather, I don't always feel like I have to have an opinion about something when I'm in a conversation but I do feel that it enables me to ask more relevant questions,
Yeah.
and hear different viewpoints. you know, um, and not just be completely um, uh, ignorant about a
Yeah.
specific subject, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I also find that I encounter some people who they'll have heard something, and I'm sure I've done it before too, where you hear something on the news or on a podcast or something, and then you quote that as your own opinion. Um, yeah,
Correct.
without having kind of looked at the other side or at any other perspectives on the issue. You just go, oh, well, I heard X, Y, Z, so this is what I believe or this is what I think. But yeah,
Yes. Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of that going on, and you see that in how people react. You know, do not say anything about the leader of my favorite political party. You know, I will defend that to the death. You know,
yeah,
without understanding or without the context and so on, and that's dangerous. I don't want to be in that kind of position. You know,
yeah,
but you have to be open to be proven wrong.
yeah,
You must be prepared to change your mind about something
yeah,
when you engage on something, which is exactly what we're talking about. I think we came at it more from a point of view of, wow, you know what, over the last 6 months or whatever, I have actually changed my mind or my viewpoint about certain things.
yeah,
Um, and it has become evident without you going consciously going, oh, I'm going to seek out
yeah,
new wisdom out
yeah,
there in the world.
yeah, you're right.
Um,
It happens naturally.
yeah, it happens naturally because you allowed it to happen. I mean,
Yeah,
you can also, be very steadfast in certain beliefs, um, and not be willing to listen to other viewpoints, or even if something looks like it makes sense to you, you can, well, that's not how my tribe think, and therefore just going to shut it down.
yeah,
Um, it, that's all I'm looking for in people is be open and look at the different alternatives and think for yourself, that concept of think for yourself
yeah,
and not go, this is how I was taught, or this is what my tribe believes in. Um, Actively think for yourself
yeah. So I
and
like
get
I
comfortable with your own viewpoints here.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's kind of like the theme for our podcast, this whole idea of kind of stay curious and ask questions um and I don't, it feels like that's kind of our theme. And I do remember that being a theme when we worked together too, is be curious, ask questions, think for yourself. I'm
Absolutely.
sure we had think for yourself on a poster up on the wall. um
Oh yeah,
yeah.
lots of that. Challenge the status quo. It's
Yeah.
very much still part. I was just thinking the other day when I looked at I don't know if you've seen the about this LK99, this superconductor
I haven't seen that.
material. There's a anyway. There's quite a thing about superconductor is something that the scientific community has been looking for more than 100 years. I think is fair to say, and it's the thing that will really revolutionize a lot of things in terms of how electricity is conducted, etc. Um, no loss through heat and other ways, etc., etc. And the whether this turns out to be true or not, kind of irrelevant. It's a step in the right direction, etc., etc. But the point is that there are enough people who are constantly curious and challenging in so many different areas
Mhm.
that are looking for new discoveries. Um, and without that, if we thought that we had kind of reached peak, you know, the peak of civilization, and if we can just stay as we are, nothing changed, you know, everything would be wonderful. You can kind of pick any point in history and go back and say, wow, you know what? If we had kind of done that, then wow, you know, life would have been so much worse. So it's kind of a natural thing, I think,
Yeah.
to be curious about, and how does this work, and how can we improve this, and how can we make this better. This is a very, very small subset of that. How do we become better human beings?
Yeah.
um, and then right down to that where we can, wow, there's this new thing that can actually conduct electricity a hell of a lot more efficient and make it more cheaper, etc., which will ultimately benefit um, all of humankind.
Yeah.
Um, so that's, for me, the central message behind this. Challenge the status quo, think for yourself, be curious, challenge your own viewpoints.
Yeah.
Um, Really important to me.
Cool. On that note, thank you very much, Herman. Be
Thanks,
curious,
Annie.
be open to change, challenge the status quo, and we'll chat again soon. Thank you.